that's totally fine. Uh, where do I start? So, as I said yesterday, briefly, somehow like your message just resonated with me very deeply. And I think the reason is I've been on this spiritual journey, path, whatever, for the last 6 years. And with a 2-year break in between. But I think that was also necessary for the evolution to happen. And in the last year especially, I've been very much reading Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta Maharaj, Robert Adams. And so I think as a result, I just feel like my space, inner space, is just at that right point where I've been able to kind of, when I heard your message, it just really made a lot of sense, if I may call it so. So where I stand, so I guess maybe, if you have specific questions you want to ask me to assess my understanding, that's fine. Or I can jump straight into sort of the question that I have.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a very clear understanding of the 3 states, the sleep, the waking, the dream, and the dream state. And through just my own observation and through the guidance of Ramana Maharshi and other gurus, the teachings from them, it's very clear to me that just like the dream state comes and goes, this is very similar. At least I have suspicion that this state is not as real as it really seems. And my spiritual journey started with my father passing away 6 years ago. And it's through the process of the course of various teachings of what I've come to that point where death doesn't mean anything to me, in the sense fear awful. It's just like, to me, it's just like no different from the state of sleep. So it's, to me, intuitively, it feels one and the same state. Now, the question that I have, because I typed it out so that I could articulate what I was going to say. So here's what I'll read it out to you. I understand that the sense of I, exists in all 3 states. That is the substratum upon which all these other states come and go. And yet I remain. Can also come and go. I have no fear whatsoever, death. It is meaningless and I can drop dead right now. So the sense of I am, not the thought, is the self, as the sages say. Maharshi says, hold on that I am and investigate whence the ego I springs from. And it's my question is, I've really been able to be successful, so to speak, in that investigation, to know where I thought is coming from. I go silence now. I can just literally sit and go feel the silence and know that that is sort of the background of which stuff goes. So that silence, that sense of silence, that sense of being, is that the ultimate self? And one more question I have is, all the gurus say the same thing, which is that self is the impersonal I. Like you said in one of your videos too, I noticed, it's the impersonal I. How do you experience that impersonal I? Meaning that which is in Satya is the same as in Alon, as in my wife or my kids, that it is all one and the same. So that I'm able to experience. Is that the thing to expect? Why not? Because that's kind of the basis of the question.
One of the traps for the mind is that it tries to understand or know the direct experience of who you are. Yet it is beyond speech and mind, so it cannot be ever understood. It can only be directly experienced. Directly experienced means there is no thought that actually is an agent between between yourself, the real self, and anything else. Because everything else that we experience is of the mind. Yeah? The world, the body sensation, anything basically of the world is experienced through the mind, because when there is no thought, we cannot say there is a world, we cannot say there isn't a world. That's correct? So direct experience is beyond anything we can conceptualize or understand. Yet we can say that there gotta be an indirect knowledge and direct knowledge of understanding in the mind. So even the understanding knowledge and the conviction that who you truly are is that sense of I amness, which is not a thought. This is understanding of the mind.
Okay.
When one directly experiences it, this understanding also is gone, vanish.
Okay.
Okay? So the main thing is when you examine the I thought, or where it arises from, what Ramana Maharshi points, or what I understand he's pointing at, yeah, it's an interpretation obviously, is that when you directly experience who you are, then you would notice the sense of I rises. And then out of habit it would catch the mind's attention, and the mind would get lost in a dream. And that's where the inquiry comes into who is thinking this thought, or who is dreaming this thought. I am. And then it's like, who am I, or where is this I am arise from? And when you ask that question, it gets the mind to deepen back into the source of being of who you are.
Okay.
So what happens a lot of the time, the inquiry, who am I, is too early for the mind. Because where Ramana is pointing and speaking is he was abiding as that.
Right.
And from that perspective, we can say there's the absolute perspective and there's the mind perspective. From the absolute perspective, when the thought arises, when he inquired where is that thought arise from, the thought just subsided and merged back into the beingness of who he truly is.
Right.
When the mind is going outward through the senses to the objects of the world, from this mind perspective, this inquiry, who am I, is almost cannot go deep enough.
Okay.
So that's where in the scriptures they point very clearly that to awaken the intellect, the buddhi they call it, the determined faculty that determines the true nature of objects and discriminates between what's real and what's unreal. So it's hearing the knowledge, and then it's reflecting upon the knowledge, might be reading, and then thinking about it and seeing it from within, and then discriminating the thought. Even discriminating the I thought to see is it real or unreal. Because when you examine the thought, the unreality of the thought reveals.
It appears as a thought itself, right? The I itself.
That's right. And then when you see it's a thought, that's a proof that you are not that thought, because you are the one who see it.
You're prior to it, yes.
Yeah. If you go and I'll send you a document of Seer and the Seen, and he talks about principles of discrimination. One of the principles is that the moment there is a scene, the seer is totally different than the scene itself. So the moment there is the I thought is seen, the one who sees that I thought is totally different than the I itself.
Oh, so like I think at least in theory, I understand that. In fact, I was reading something this morning in which it said the seer and the seen appear simultaneously. In other words, right? Which are both from the real self.
So, obviously, the seer and the seen is a duality.
Right.
Because who you are truly doesn't see anything because it alone exists. It's non-dual reality.
Right.
It doesn't. There is no other for it to see. It illuminates itself by itself and everything else. Yet it doesn't perceive it or see any thought.
Okay.
So the moment there is a sense of I see the thoughts,
it's already duality.
It's already duality. Just discriminate that and realize this is not the real self.
Right.
And there was one sage in India that was pointing, his whole teaching was keep giving up until there's nothing to give up, then what remains is the self.
Okay.
So instead of trying to gain the direct experience of who you are, which is already you, just remove what you're not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's removing the false. What you think is you, remove, discriminate it, question it, see if it is real, see if it remains when you discriminate it. See what happens when there is a gap in the stream of thought and there is no thought for a moment. You remain. And then a thought appears and now it begins. Now you discriminate it. And now you question. From that point, if there is no thought and a thought appears, you can ask, who am I without this thought? So it's like, who am I? And if there's enough vigilance, after the question ends, if there's no other thought, silence remains, and that's you.
Okay.
And silence doesn't perceive anything. Okay. It is aware of itself by itself, and in that direct experience, there is no wife, there is no child, there is no I. Yeah, it alone exists.
Right. So I can understand what you're pointing at, because I can experience those very same small gaps, very small, very brief, and yet. So, but isn't that a thought itself, or no? That's not a thought.
Okay. So can you be still for a moment?
Oh, do it right now.
Yes. Keep your eyes open. Keep them open. Don't move at all. Now, just wait. Watch to see if there is a thought. Still be still, and images would come, past, future, or just subtle movement. Question if you can see or know what would be the next thought. Ask the question and wait. the truth is that it takes no practice nor time to directly experience who you are. Any practice and time is of the mind. So basically the mind is just returning back to the substratum, its source, the true being of who you are. Yeah? It's not that you wake up or you return to who you are. You are already you, whether you think you are you or you think you're something else, doesn't change the fact that you are that self which is changeless.
Right.
Yeah? So the mind is just yearning to seek the truth and dissolve into it.
Okay.
So the whole work is to hear the knowledge, because that removes ignorance, reflecting upon it, because that's direct the thoughts back into the source of its being, and discriminate, inquire, or concentrate. So when it goes inward, it merges and dissolves into you, and you remain as the self, which is not personal. It has nothing to do with your name, nothing to do with the form, nothing to do with anything that we project outside ourselves.
So like in this instance, that those gaps, those little gaps, right? So that's pointing to the real self. Yes?
That's right. So the more you question the mind dissolves or the thought disappear. Yeah? When the mind is a stream of thought, so when there is no thought, one thought, there is no mind.
Oh, there's no thought.
When there is no thought, there is no mind.
Right.
When the thought stops, it's like the movie that is made from images projected upon the screen stop. And what reveals is the screen. What reveals is who you truly are.
Right.
The more you question the mind dissolves and you remain as you.
Right. Okay.
So it's reverse. Instead of I want to understand and I want to know that what I experience is who I am, which is all a trick of the mind. Because if you would ask, who wants to know? The answer will be always I am.
Right.
And then if you question, who is this I? Am I this I?
Okay.
So that will reveal the trick.
Right. So actually, yes, I do have a follow-on similar along the same question, and I think in one of her videos, in the video that's called non-dual reality, there's a long.
Yes.
In that, it said the same thing, which is the very idea of practice itself is kind of a paradox, right? And Nisargadatta Maharaj, as one of his quotes actually says, the one who sits to meditate is your ignorance. So I understand that, and yet to be able to get to this point that my understanding is, or anybody else who has to be able to see that self, that silence, something happened into this point. I guess at this point, what is further practice? So is the practice just not attached to things and just being as much as possible in your beingness? What practice at that point?
It's as long as I sense I'm a separate entity, that I am an individual being, identifying myself as a physical body, I practice until the realization comes that the one who's practiced has nothing to do with who I am.
Right.
So it's important to practice from the mind's perspective.
Right.
It's ignorance to practice from who you truly are perspective, because who you are never move, changeless awareness. So what practice does it know or practice? So it now just depends from what perspective are we looking at. So from the mind perspective, I tell people, practice. You practice and you check the notion of the one who's practicing. You check the one that thinks it is meditating. And you see if that one is you. If that one is real. Yeah? And that's the practice to come to realize that the one who was thinking was practicing was just an illusion, dreaming it all along.
Right. Illusory figure, yes.
Yes.
Right.
It's also an illusion the illusion that you're going to get rid from the shadow is the shadow creating this illusion.
So this Satya creating this illusion that the Satya is going to disappear. Yeah.
I don't know the meaning of Satya, so enlighten me the meaning of it.
It Satya.
Okay, like the self, and
I'm talking Geva, the individual Geva.
The Geva. Okay, yeah. This is the power of Maya, the power of illusion.
Right.
Yeah. She creates an illusion, and now in the illusion she tries to get rid of the illusion, when in fact all of it is inside the illusion itself.
Right. In such a fact, actually, from my perspective, I know some time back, this was maybe 2 months ago, one day I said, this whole thing is a joke. This whole thing is one grand because the whole thing is illusion. If the whole thing is illusion, then who's the seeker, who's not the seeker, what's good, what's bad? The whole thing is just a big trap.
This is why one of the things that one has to really pay attention to is telling the story of your evolution. I've been practicing and this is what I come to realize, and I, all this I is nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
So that's okay. Just make sure that here I am going to come and tell you a story, and recognize the story is not me, and the one who's telling it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
And okay, I'm telling just a story, storyteller, and it's just like when you read, if you have a son or a child, and you tell them a story, you read them a fairy tale story, they might believe the story is real.
Right.
Yet when you read it, you don't have any doubt. You know that it's not real.
Right.
So any story you tell about yourself,
It's just a story.
yeah, just recognize it's no different than telling your son a story, yes?
Okay. No, that is beautiful. Yeah. Yes. So now recognize that it's a story. Recognize that this illusion and this is a state that's going to come and go. I mean, this illusory Jiva that's going to come and go. Now, but still this Jiva has to function in this illusory world. No? So, how Jiva functions in this world, it's very easy to sort of forget your true self. I mean, it's only so back the notes that I made, it's like the self is the background upon which this dream is happening, this living dream. In fact, talking is the part this is happening. But I'm in conversation or in work situations and so on, it's very sort of get caught and then slap myself later. It happens. I guess at some point that will not confirm, I guess. Is that what will happen?
So this is looking for a plan You're looking for a reference point into the future of something in particular to happen, yes?
No, it's not about a plan for something to happen. It's just more.
Not you, I'm not talking about you. This is what the mind does. Yeah?
I can see what, yeah.
Because what the mind thinks and imagine that there is an awakening somewhere there in the future that doesn't even exist.
Okay.
Yeah? This is how the mind postponement of something that is already omnipresent.
Right.
Here, right now, nothing to do with space and nothing to do with time.
Okay.
So, how is it functioning in the world? The question one has to ask is, what is the proof I have actually that there is a world? And then if you go and read and open the non-dual reality, and which is this book, okay?
Oh, okay.
This book. And also if you open this book, The Seer and the Seen, yes,
okay,
and you read them, and you go into what they point,
okay,
it reveals more and more the power of this illusion.
okay. I'm just making a note, okay. Okay.
Because it's to examine this illusion.
Right.
And because the way illusion works, when you seek it, it vanishes.
Right.
When you do not look for it, it grows infinitely.
Right.
So forgetfulness happens so quickly out of habit.
Right. Right.
So it's undoing that habit without believing that you're doing it.
Okay. Okay. When you say that, I know I'm coming from the dreamer perspective, of course.
It's okay. Don't judge it.
What's that? I'm sorry?
Don't judge it.
So the Geva, Alon, has to feed himself, has to have a shelter, has to do stuff in the world. So is there full awareness as those actions happen that this is all illusory? Always?
First of all, I write there stop.
Okay.
When I hear the Geva alone needs to feed itself,
Okay.
I do not know.
Oh.
It needs to have a shelter, I do not know. I can only recognize, okay, for the body there is a shelter right now, and this is also going to change. So it doesn't really matter. When the body eats, it's supposed to get food and nourished, and this is also going to change. So it doesn't really matter. It doesn't make the mind oblivious about it. It doesn't get the mind to neglect it. Yet at the same time, I do not know what I need.
Okay.
Except what is happening. This is always gives me the proof that what is happening is exactly what I need.
Okay.
So otherwise I have all kind of ideas what I need, which have nothing to do with what is truly happening moment by moment.
Okay.
So I find it to be very ordinary. It's just very ordinary. And if I have out of habit desires or some things that I want, I say I make fun of the mind. The silly mind is dreaming, deluded.
Right.
Thinks it needs this and want that, and this is important.
Right.
I'm dreaming that at night and it appears to be real, and then when I wake up,
Yeah.
what did I realize? That it was just a dream. So I'm just, when I think this thought, I am aware that I am dreaming a dream, and it has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with who I am, and has nothing to do with what is, as it is.
Okay. Okay.
So the only thing is that whatever you do in life, just pay attention if there is conflict or not conflict. Because conflict is always the false identification, the I that identifies with the body. And that false identification operates in such a way that it always wants what it doesn't have.
Right.
And it doesn't want what it has. Conflict driven.
Mm-hmm.
So you watch that. You watch where there's identification. You watch where there is conflict. You watch when there's resistance. You watch when there's judgment. You watch when there's reaction. Not thinking there shouldn't be a reaction. Not thinking it shouldn't be judgment there. Not thinking conflict shouldn't arise. Because if I think I shouldn't judge, I shouldn't react, and I shouldn't be in conflict, then when judgment appears, then I judge the judgment. It's a negativity.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that applies for all the whole three of them.
So when the judgment comes, or take the example of some resistance comes to something that is happening, so you observe and say this is just another passing phase, or how do you?
I question.
Okay.
I question, and I can stick with one question. Mm-hmm. So the one who is judging is always the same one. I am.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
The false I.
Right.
So I ask, who am I without this thought?
Right.
Because the judgment is in the mind, nothing to do with the objects of the world.
Right.
The conflict is in the mind. So when I sense there is a conflict, it means I want something different than what is. So I ask, who am I without this desire or without this thought?
Okay. Okay.
Yes?
In the process, does that conflict then dissolve?
The moment you ask the question, it's an inner action, mental action. There's no reaction anymore.
Okay.
There are not two thoughts at the same time. So if the mind is reactive, there's no mental action. When there's mental action, which is questioning, there's no mental reaction. It's finished.
Okay.
The only thing that happens for the majority is that there is already body sensation, which we call emotion.
Yeah.
You have to leave it alone. You focus on the thoughts, not on the emotions or sensation.
Okay.
Because emotion is always a physical reaction in the body to a thought that appears to be real, although it is not real.
Right. Right. Okay.
So this work is working with the subtle, means working with the thoughts.
Right.
Yeah? The illusion is the thoughts, the mind,
Right.
not the objects of the world. Leave them alone.
Okay.
Okay? So whatever is needed with the objects of the world, the body and the prana moves the body anyway.
Oh, okay.
And whatever is required, it's like, if I would say to the mind's job is to question itself.
Okay.
That's the only real work for the mind, which is not even real, yeah? It questions the illusion and it disappears, and reality as you remains.
Right, right. Okay, yes, it's very subtle work, yes.
Okay. So that's the work in the dream.
Right. That is great. So, the one question remains. Just So one, as the sages say, it's the one entity that's achieving this whole dream. I still mentally, maybe perhaps, question, how do I realize that one entity, but it's one and there's nothing else?
When there is a direct experience of silence, and then there is a thought afterwards. Prior to that thought, what was the experience? Were there two?
It was just silence.
So what is it? One, two, or neither of these concepts?
I think neither.
You stay with that.
Okay. Okay.
It's so simple, yet the mind cannot comprehend it ever because it cannot perceive it.
Okay.
Just like the object cannot perceive the physical eye, and the physical eye cannot perceive the mind, the thoughts, and the thoughts cannot perceive who you truly are. It cannot. They cannot go back. It just dissolve into who you are.
Right.
So this is beyond the speech, or beyond the reach and of speech and mind. This is where in the Viveka, there's the Viveka.
Okay. Oh, okay. This is a thing again from Ramana.
No, this is Shankaracharya, Viveka Chudamni. Yes?
Yeah.
So this is the first sloka he begins. He says it. It is beyond the reach of speech and mind. So speech is always under physical body.
Right.
And mind is thought. So it cannot be understood. I do not understand who I am.
Okay.
I can understand what I am not.
Right. Right. Okay.
Work that way. Negation.
Okay. Right. Right. So
Because otherwise its ego wants to gain.
Right.
It wants to gain silence.
Right.
Yet it never knows what silence is.
Right.
Because the thoughts are sound appearing within the silence and the body makes noise.
Okay. Okay. So in that case then, from this perspective, things like karma and all that just becomes a mere concept, really.
Karma was and is and will be only a concept.
Okay.
So as long as I believe the dream to be real,
Right.
then the karma appears to be real too.
Right. Right. Okay.
That's how it plays itself out. It's
Right.
the power of illusion that it can make the impossible possible. So even the unreal for somehow creates a real suffering.
Right. Right.
When in fact every suffering is unreal in the first place. So how did it become real? Just because the mind identifies itself as a physical body means it identifies itself as an object, and the object in the waking state creates a veiling and therefore it appears so real. Yet in the dream, when I dream, it appears as real as the waking state. I have no idea that there is a waking state.
Right.
Only when I wake up from the dream, I realize that it was just a dream. Did I do anything to wake up? I couldn't even decide in the dream to wake myself up from it.
Right.
So it's an arrogance of the mind in the waking state to think that it can wake itself out from the dream. See, it's
Right.
the same trap.
Right. It is the same. Yeah.
So if you see the trap, it has no power because you see it's not real.
Right.
And this is what knowledge does. It peers through the illusion to see the illusion as illusion, not as something real.
Right, right. It's a powerful, yes. Very powerful.
It appears so.
So, and all those that you interact with, they're all in this self-induced illusion, or rather, I guess they're all in my mind, really.
That's right, only.
Right.
So we think we interact externally. The only relationship we have is between one thought to another. So the all relationships are within the mind, between conceptual images, between thoughts about me as an object, physical body, and other objects of the world, which is actually other thoughts about objects of the world.
Right, right. Yeah.
So it's again, if I think I have a relationship external, then I'm not focusing on where the relationship truly is happening. Because if I say, okay, I have relationship external, and I would ask, who is perceiving it?
Right.
I am. So the relationship is where?
In thoughts.
Within my mind, as thoughts. And the mind is a bundle of thoughts. That's what Ramana is pointing. Anyone who's questioning the thoughts would notice that, would come to this conclusion, to this knowing. So when people say, yes, Alon, I understand what you're talking, except what we do in the real life. And then they point out in the objects like they are in relationship with the objects again. Because suddenly there's inside and outside.
Right.
Even the concept of external and internal, only the mind created these divisions.
Right.
The body itself doesn't know this concept at all.
Right.
So it brings every time back to question your thoughts, question the mind, question where the thought arises from, question this I, discriminate,
Right.
question if the thought is real. Even this, just examining when thoughts appear, are they real or not real? Is this thought real? What is really reality?
Right.
In the mind, when you question the mind because it's a phantom, it disappears because the light is brought into there.
Right.
It's like the child would say, Father, Father, I have a ghost in the room. Okay, and you said, let's check. You turn on the light. Nobody, no ghost, no nothing. You turn off the light and say, it's here, I see it. Then you turn on the light. It's not there. He was projecting it. He was imagining it. There is no ghost. The same with the thoughts. The same with the mind. So the thoughts are not an enemy. They are just not real. And
Right.
they are just not me, who I truly am.
Right. Right. By questioning continuously, they dissolve.
Not even when the mind is sharp, means the intellect, the buddhi, the discriminative faculty, when it examines, not eventually dissolve.
Yeah.
When you examine instantaneously, it dissolves.
Right, and I think the same thing is with the icon too, right? The moment you say, where is this icon? It just, there's nothing, there's silence.
I don't want to come to this conclusion. I'd like to examine it and see what remains,
Right.
or remain with the experience without seeking for that experience either.
Okay.
Because in the beginning it's just the mind, and that's what the sages said, the maturity of the mind. It examines because it is attached to future outcome.
Right, right, okay.
So every time the examination happens, when you notice that the mind is attached to future outcome, just recognize that too.
Okay.
Then this habit loses the power because
Right.
there is light on that.
Right.
So I don't know if it answers the question, and I do not know if it is helpful.
It is very helpful. Yes, it is. It's a very helpful pointer in the right direction. Thank you so much. I just want to see it. I think this process of its own. The other question did have.
I'll send you the document of the seer and the seen.